Alright guys, welcome back, and today we're going to be starting a new lesson. Today we're going to be talking about the Pythagorean Theorem, and our objective for today is given two sides, students will use the Pythagorean Theorem to find the unknown side in a right triangle. Alright, let's get straight into it. Now, first of all, ask the question, or some of you may ask the question, what in the world is the Pythagorean Theorem? Well, long story short, there was a Greek mathematician by the name of Pythagoras, and he developed a theorem that basically says that the square of the hypotenuse of a right triangle is equal to the sum of the squares of the other two sides. And we're going to dig deeper into that as we go throughout this lesson. But keying in on um, the square of the hypotenuse of a right triangle is equal to the sum of the squares of the other two sides. And essentially, there is the actual formula for the Pythagorean theorem there. Now, what is a right triangle? A right triangle, first of all, one of the biggest uh, things about a right triangle is that it has a right angle, and you see the right angle right here. The sides, the sides of a right triangle, you have two legs, and then you have the hypotenuse, which is the longest side. It's always the longest side, and it is adjacent to the right angle. Okay, no matter where the triangle sits, the hypotenuse is always adjacent to the right angle. Um, I just said the two sides make up the legs, and the opposite side is the hypotenuse. Let's keep it moving. The Pythagorean theorem in a right triangle, A and B. Um, let's simplify this and let's consider A and B the legs, and we're going to call C the hypotenuse. Now, yeah, that can vary, but for right now, let's just keep it simple. A and B are going to be our legs, and C is the hypotenuse, okay, or the hypotenuse, or not the hippopotamus, the hypotenuse. All right. We're going to deal with that a little bit later. Yeah, let's go ahead and get into the steps, okay? So I want you to pause the video and I want you to jot down these steps. Jot down these steps. I hope you pause the video, pause the video, pause the video. I hope you did it. All right, so now let's get into working these steps and solving the Pythagorean theorem. All right, so we see the first step is to identify the variables, all right? So in identifying the variables, the first thing that students want to do is they want to talk about the numbers and know a variable is a letter that represents a number, okay? So when I say identify the variables, I want to know, what am I talking about? Am I talking about A, B, or C? So the first step and the most important thing is to identify what do I have, so I can determine what am I looking for, because remember, there are three of them, and remember our objectives, we're going to have two of them, and we need to figure out the unknown. But the first part of figuring out the unknown is knowing what the unknown is. So now here's a right triangle, and if I'm looking at the right triangle, I see my right angle, and I told you guys that the right angle is always adjacent to the hypotenuse. Or I tell my students this: I like to make a little arrow out of it. I make a little arrow out of it. And what does an arrow do? An arrow points. Hey, listen, that's a straight line. Y'all know my lines is always crooked. A arrow points. And if you're walking with your friends in the store or the mall or wherever you're at the beach, and you're pointing, what's the purpose of pointing? You're pointing because you want them to see whatever you're pointing at. The purpose of pointing is to see. So if I got an arrow, where's my arrow pointing at? It's pointing to C. So it's pointing to C. That means I've now identified where my hypotenuse is. Now, if I'm identifying my variables, what variables do I have? Well, here's C, and there's not a number out here by C. Therefore, my variables have to be A and B. Now, it doesn't matter if you call 5A or 5B. It doesn't matter if you call 7A or 7B. But long as I know, because they're both legs, the most important variable to identify is C, the hypotenuse. Now, so let's just call A5, and we'll call B7, and then we don't know what C is. So I'm going to put a question mark. Okay? The next step, I say write down the formula. Now, my formula is, what is my Now, we don't really have a function to put the squared key, so we're going to do it this way. A squared plus B squared equals C squared. Now, I'm just using the up arrow to indicate the squared. Okay, so there's my formula. What is the next step in my formula? And this is 2, the second step. Now I'm on the third step, which is substitute the values for the variables. Now the values will be the numbers. Therefore, we said A was going to be 5. So I have 5 squared plus 7 squared. And that equals C squared. I lost my arrow. Okay. Okay, so now remember we do have the online calculator. We do have the online calculator. So if you don't know how to do square numbers in your head, go to the online calculator. Here you will see the squared, and we know that that's 25, and 7 is 49. Okay, so you have 5 squared, which is 25, and we'll go back to class kick and show this. So now we're on step 4, which is simplify and solve. We have 25 plus 49 equals C squared, and I'm gonna just do this right now. C2. All right, so now we're at the simplify and solve stage. So we got our 25 plus our 79, 49 plus 49 equals 74. All right. So we know that 74 equals C squared. Now for the final step, now that C squared, that's not C. The biggest mistake that a lot of students make is they will leave that as C squared. They'll just as 74, and that's not correct. C squared is 74, not C. We need to know C. So in order to do this, what you want to do is we want to use inverse operations. What do you mean by inverse operations, Mr. George? Well, the inverse of addition is subtraction. The inverse of multiplication is division. Well, the inverse of squaring a number is taking the square root of it. And remember, what you do on one side, you have to do on both sides. Okay? What you do on one side, you have to do on both sides of the equal sign. So now we're looking at the square root of 74, and yeah, we definitely need the calculator for this one. The square root of 74, and it tells us that the answer is 8.602. I want you all to round to the nearest hundredth place. We'll round it to the nearest hundredth place. Therefore, the answer to this question, C, is, hold on, gotta get my, I didn't mean to do that. I meant to get the selection tool. C equals 8.60. And I'm just gonna get rid of this click here, okay? I'm gonna work another example for you all so that you're clear on that, okay? Let's go ahead and go to our second example. All right, here's my next example, and I'm going to move this out of the way. Sorry, that is all in the way, and I did not mean to go back to that. Ladies and gentlemen, my B on that one. All right, so let's get back to it. So I'm going to work this example kind of fast for you. So, and then I'll include the next. I'm gonna make this a 2-part video. But first things first, identify the variables. What variables do I have here? Okay. Remember, we want to look at our right angle. Our right angle is pointing. We're gonna say we always point. We're pointing to the hypotenuse. Remember, I told you guys, hey, when you point at somebody, you point because you want them to see what you're looking at. You want them to see what you're looking at. So we're pointing at our C. Therefore, our two variables, let's call it A and B. So for step 1, A, let's call it 12. And remember, it doesn't matter which one we call this. And then our B, let's call that 16. And we don't know what our hypotenuse is. So we're going to put a question mark. All right. Step number 2. We want to write down our formula. Okay. A squared plus B squared equals C squared. 3. Substitute our values for variables. Yeah, I said that right. Got a little tongue tied. Don't judge me. So that'll be 12 squared. And I'm definitely going to use the arrow here because I don't want that to look like 122. Plus 16 squared, use the arrow again, equals C squared. All right. So now we're at the part where we need to simplify and solve. Now, many of you may not know this off the top of your head, but 12 squared is 144. And if you don't know 16 squared off the top of your head, no problem. 16 squared, it tells us that it's 256 equals C squared. Okay, so now I need to add 144. So now we have 144 plus our 256. And that gives us 400. So I know that 400 equals C squared. Okay. Remember, the final step is you want to take the square root of both sides, and there's not a square root symbol, so I'm just going to draw one in here with my pencil. Oh, you guys can't see that. And there's the bell. Man, that second square root sign is ugly. I'm going to erase that, redraw that. That is ugly. Okay? So, the square root of 400, and we if you don't know it, the square root of 400 is 20, but I'll prove it to you. Square root of 400 is 20. Therefore, our C is 20. All right, so that's part A of this lesson. I'm going to stop it here because, you know, I don't like my videos to be longer than 14 to 15 minutes, and I did a little bit of explaining. The second part of the video is going to be when we have the hypotenuse, okay? All right, so let's pause the video here and then go check out that other video, and I'll catch you guys in a second. Peace.